On a sunny morning, something unusual happened. I heard footsteps coming into the house. It was Kevin and Elizabeth, carrying a lot of luggage. They were breathing heavily, but when they saw me, they smiled sarcastically and said, "We're moving in with you today. If you don't like it, divorce me and leave." I was shocked, but Kevin and Elizabeth started setting up their things in the living room. Then, Stella came in, looking sorry. I quietly said, "It's okay, but are you sure about this?" Kevin looked pale when he heard me. He quickly ran out of the house. A few minutes later, he called me, yelling so loud that even Elizabeth could hear it. "Are you serious? Why didn't you say anything before?" I calmly replied, "I thought I mentioned it." After a pause, Kevin said, "Anyway, I'm coming back," and hung up suddenly. Elizabeth seemed like she might faint from Kevin's yelling. I said, "I'm actually looking forward to Kevin coming back," which made Elizabeth twitch in surprise. I added, "Get ready, the trouble's just starting. My name is Madison, and I'm 45 years old. I work in an office, and last year, I got transferred to a very busy department, so I've been working a lot. I married Kevin when I was 40. We met at a company party where Kevin was a guest, and we hit it off because we're both from the same hometown. Kevin is 5 years older than me and is very confident, which was perfect for me because I had almost given up on marriage by that time. We dated for a year and got married without a wedding ceremony because Kevin thought it was a waste of money, which made me a little sad, but looking back, I wish I had thought more about the marriage before agreeing. "Hey, you didn't do the laundry again, did you?" Kevin asked. He was what people call a henpecked husband. Before we got married, he lived alone and could do housework, but after we married, he started saying men shouldn't do housework. He refused to do it and told me, "I'll do it tonight," since I got home late from work. I replied, "Coming home to be yelled at just makes me more tired." Kevin, upset with my response, raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't talk back. Who do you think brings home the food you eat?" Honestly, I earn more money than Kevin. He knew this when we got married, and we agreed on both of us working, but after a year of marriage, it felt like he had completely forgotten that. I used to argue with him, but as Kevin kept getting angrier and shouting more, I stopped. I quickly started apologizing just to keep the peace. "I'm sorry, it was my fault." Kevin replied, "Do you really think so?" "Yes, thank you," I said. "It's because of your hard work that we can live this life." This would make Kevin happy. He'd hum a tune and then go take a bath. At first, I thought his henpecked behavior was kind of manly, but after 3 years, I was getting tired of it. I didn't choose divorce though, because my in-laws were such wonderful people. I'd go out to lunch with my mother-in-law, Mia, once a month, and my father-in-law, Ricky, would give me birthday gifts. At their house, Kevin was kind and smiled, and we had good times together. My own parents had passed away when I was young, so my in-laws were like real parents to me. That's why I hesitated to divorce Kevin. But there was one thing I couldn't stand: Elizabeth, Kevin's sister-in-law, who lived nearby. Elizabeth had divorced because of her affair and now lived alone in an apartment. When I heard about her affair, I started to dislike her. Elizabeth didn't like me either and would badmouth me in front of Kevin, who always supported her instead of reprimanding her. Elizabeth had a daughter named Stella, who lived with her ex-husband. Stella was the spitting image of Elizabeth, but she had a completely different, kind personality. Stella was a very good girl. She used to visit Elizabeth about twice a month, and each time, Elizabeth would bring Stella to our house. "Just a minute, Madison. Please feed Stella something delicious. I'm heading out," Elizabeth would say as she left. "Thanks, bye," Elizabeth would say quickly and leave without waiting for me to respond. Every time, Stella would apologize, and I couldn't ignore such a sweet girl like her. So, I ended up feeding her and taking her out to different places. "Madison, thank you, as always," Stella would say. "It's okay, did you have fun?" I'd ask. "Yes, it was really fun, can I come again?" "Of course," I'd say, smiling as Stella watched my face, shyly asking. I couldn't say no to her. Since I didn't have children of my own, I found Stella very endearing, but I also thought it wasn't good that her real mom, Elizabeth, was never around when Stella visited. So, I decided to ask Kevin, "Hey, whenever Stella comes, Elizabeth is never around, can't she spend a little more time with her?" I only wanted the best for Stella, but Kevin didn't take it that way. His face turned red with anger, and he shouted, "Elizabeth is hurt from her divorce. Unlike you, she's delicate, and yet, you blame her?" I tried to explain, "No, it's not like that. I was just wondering where she goes every time after dropping Stella off. Kevin snapped. There's no need for you to know, just shut up and listen. I didn't say anything more. Kevin wasn't listening to me at all. After a few more apologies from me, Kevin calmed down and started getting ready to leave. I'm heading out, he said. Where are you going? I asked. It's my business. You just stay quiet and say, have a nice day, Kevin yelled as he slammed the door and left. Alone in the quiet room, I cried. It was then that I seriously started to think about divorce, but I hesitated because of my in-laws. A little later, Mia, my mother-in-law, invited me to lunch, and I decided to go after a long time. Where are you going on your day off? Kevin asked. I'm going to lunch with Kevin's mom, I replied. Just don't talk about Elizabeth, Kevin warned me. Why not? I asked, not understanding what Kevin meant. Kevin shouted in frustration, can't you think a little? You're really stupid, just go already and don't talk about Elizabeth. Before I could respond, Kevin shoved me out of the house. Still upset, I went to meet Mia, and we talked over lunch. By the way, Elizabeth is coming over, right? Mia asked. Huh, you knew? I said. I thought so. Mia sighed deeply and then apologized to me. Apparently, Stella had told Mia that she was bothering me by visiting. I thought I raised her strictly, but maybe it's a reaction, Mia said. She's into nightclubs. Nightclubs? I asked, surprised. That's right, Mia replied. She seems to have a lot of debt. I was shocked by Mia's words. When Elizabeth came to our house, she always wore expensive clothes and seemed well off. When I told Mia this, Mia looked even more troubled. That child, we've cut ties with her, Madison. You should too, Mia said. Kevin's probably spoiling Elizabeth. Mia then told me something surprising. When Elizabeth's affair was exposed, Kevin kept supporting her. He even paid off her debts. Hearing this was an eye-opener for me. I'm thinking of divorcing Kevin, I told Mia. I'm sorry for the trouble, I added. That's all right, I'll support you, Mia said, holding my hand. I thought about how things might have been if my own mom were alive, and I started making plans for the divorce. I worked on the preparations carefully so Kevin wouldn't notice. Hoping to wake Kevin up to the truth, I casually mentioned Elizabeth's debts, but Kevin wouldn't listen. As I faced more of Kevin's yelling, I realized I no longer felt any love for him. With the help of my in-laws, I gathered enough evidence and learned some shocking truths. Then, the day of action came unexpectedly. On a sunny morning, which was rare these days, I heard footsteps coming into the living room. It was Kevin and Elizabeth, carrying a lot of luggage. They were out of breath, but when they saw me, they smiled sarcastically and said, "We're moving in with you starting today. If you don't like it, divorce me and leave." Ignoring my shock, Kevin and the others began spreading their things around the living room. Then, Stella, looking apologetic, followed them in. I quietly said, "It's okay, but are you sure about this?" Kevin turned pale when he heard me, then rushed out of the house. A few minutes later, he called. When I answered, he started shouting so loudly that even Elizabeth could hear it. "Are you kidding me? Why didn't you say anything before?" he yelled. "I thought I mentioned it," I said calmly. After a pause, Kevin replied, "Anyway, I'm coming back," and then hung up suddenly. Elizabeth looked like she might faint from Kevin's yelling. "I'm actually looking forward to Kevin coming back," I said. At my words, Elizabeth's shoulders tensed in surprise. "Get ready, the trouble is just beginning," I added. When Kevin returned, he immediately confronted Elizabeth. "Elizabeth, what's this about your debts? I didn't know anything about it," he asked. "It's just a small debt," Elizabeth answered, avoiding eye contact. I couldn't help but laugh at her response. Elizabeth glared at me, so I decided to respond. "Really, Elizabeth? Calling $150,000 a small debt? I couldn't call such a huge amount a small debt." Elizabeth turned to me with a face that looked like she might cry when I casually mentioned the amount, but I had no intention of letting her off easily. "The guy from the nightclub, he recently got married, right?" Elizabeth got dumped, huh? Kevin asked. "I'm not dumped," Elizabeth snapped. "Once I get this house, he'll come back to me, and when we sell this place, we'll use the money." Elizabeth had accidentally revealed her plan and looked at Kevin with a guilty expression. Kevin, confused, kept glancing back and forth between Elizabeth and me. I decided to tell Kevin the truth. "Elizabeth plans to kick me out," Then you and she will sell the house. With the money, she'll pay off her debts and fund her nightclub guy. What the hell is that? Kevin asked, stunned. He couldn't believe his sister was using him like this. Is this all a lie? Kevin asked, his voice shaking. I want to live with Stella, so let us stay, I said, trying to reason with him. I was planning to work and support both you and Stella. Hearing Kevin's words, my head ached. He couldn't support his wife, but he was planning to support his sister and niece. Elizabeth defiantly replied, you're just an ATM, big brother. Once we sell the house, I can go back to him. Won't you listen to my request? ATM? What's that about? Kevin asked, clearly confused. Enough, Elizabeth, Kevin shouted in frustration. The two of them kept yelling at each other, and it felt ugly and ridiculous. I wasn't the one who spoke up though, it was Stella. Enough, both of you, Stella said. I don't want to live together. I only came here today to say goodbye. What do you mean? Elizabeth and Kevin both asked, shocked. They stopped fighting and turned to look at Stella. Stella sighed deeply, then looked at Elizabeth with a cool, distant gaze. She started to speak slowly. Mom, you're not interested in my life, right? I think I told you before, but I'm going to study abroad starting high school. So, today I'm here to tell you goodbye. I never heard anything like that. Elizabeth raised her voice in shock. Stella looked at her with clear disdain. Because you never really listen to me, you're always chasing after men. I don't need a mom like that. Madison is my mom. What do you mean? Elizabeth glared at Stella, as if she were an enemy, but I was just as surprised. Stella walked up to me and hugged me tightly. Thank you for holding my hand, for the delicious meals, for listening, and for taking me places. You felt like a real mom. Stella's words warmed my heart. I felt so fulfilled and happy, as if everything I had done for her had finally paid off. I never had children, so I often worried if I was interacting with Stella the right way. That's why I was even more moved by her words. Stella, I too am happy to be with you. Do your best over there, I said, wiping away my tears. Stella smiled at me. Yeah, I want to call and send messages. Is that okay? Of course, I said, and we shared a laugh. Elizabeth watched us, resentfully, then, with a smug smile, as if she had an idea, she started laughing. Stella, I'll go with you. It's hard to live there alone, isn't it? Let's live together. They'll pay for our living expenses, right? I was astounded by her audacity, and Stella beside me looked just as disgusted, but Elizabeth, unaware of our reactions, continued to fantasize about life after going abroad. Mom, while Stella's at school, we can go to the beach or shopping. When she's working her part-time job, I'll take a nap. At night, I'll go out a bit. Elizabeth only talked about leisure, with no mention of work. Stella looked at her with contempt and suddenly burst into laughter. What's so funny? Elizabeth asked angrily. It's hilarious, Stella said. Why would I want to live with you? Besides, I'm going to be in a dormitory, so you can't come. Elizabeth's face turned red with anger, but before she could lash out at Stella, someone interrupted. Enough already, came a deep voice. Ricky suddenly appeared in the living room, surprising Elizabeth. Mia was with him, looking angry. I heard from Madison and came here. How long are you going to keep troubling everyone? Mia said sharply. Mom, this is a misunderstanding. Stella decided this on her own. Elizabeth tried to explain. But Mia stepped forward, raised her hand, and a loud slap echoed in the living room. The room fell silent. Elizabeth was the first to speak. That's awful. You hit me. Mia retorted. You deserve it. I should have stepped in sooner. I left you alone after all the trouble you caused for Madison. We've arranged for you to stay with a relative. We're leaving now, Mia said. Elizabeth turned pale and looked to Kevin for help, but he avoided her gaze. Feeling betrayed, Elizabeth was led out of the house by Ricky. Kevin looked at me, pale-faced, and said, Hey, I'm sorry, I should have listened to Madison more. I'll listen from now on. Mia retorted, surprised by Kevin's casual words. What a naive thought. She continued, emotionlessly, I told you before not to involve yourself with Elizabeth, especially when you're married, but you didn't listen. Now, the only choice left is divorce. Kevin looked at me, shocked, and I smiled at him, feeling slightly relieved. I then prepared to drop the bombshell. Let's get a divorce. I'll also claim alimony for your verbal abuse, and maybe for infidelity too, I said. Kevin stumbled over his words, trying to act innocent. Infidelity? What are you talking about? I felt pathetic for ever thinking such a man could be reliable. I pulled out several photos from my bag and showed them to Kevin. Do you recognize this woman? Did you take secret photos? If someone is doing something they shouldn't, isn't it their fault? Kevin, seemingly out of excuses, stayed silent. Looking frustrated, I laid out some documents and had him sign them. After everything was finalized, I smiled at him and said, "Thank you for everything. Even though I made more money, did all the housework, and handled everything else, it was me who took care of everything, so take care, and don't forget the payments." Kevin had nothing more to say. I said goodbye to Mia and left our house. I arranged to pick up my belongings later and stayed at a nearby hotel. After dropping Stella off at her home, I finally had a clean room, a soft bed, and a space without anyone to complain. That's when I truly regained my freedom after 5 years. The next day, I promptly filed for divorce and became truly free. Mia called to apologize and assured me that Kevin would deposit the alimony within a week, which he did in full. Since Kevin had little savings left from giving money to Elizabeth, the in-laws had paid the alimony in advance. They told me not to worry, as they would get Kevin to repay it in full. Kevin lost his job and ended up living with a different relative. He was sent to a farm where he worked from dawn to dusk without any holidays. Escape was impossible without a car, and the mountain roads were too much for Kevin, who had never driven them. I thought it was tough, but I didn't feel sorry for him. Kevin's affair partner was a club girl who only saw him as a paying customer. She didn't even know he was married and apologized when I met her. She even returned the branded bags Kevin had given her, which I sold and used the money for lunches with Stella. Elizabeth was sent to live with relatives near the sea, working from sunrise every day. Her once well-maintained hair and nails were now a mess. She had fallen behind on child support payments for Stella, and the relatives had to cover it, so now she worked unpaid. I could only hope she might change her ways. Stella, on the other hand, successfully went abroad and now lives in an overseas dormitory. She's gotten close to a girl she shares a room with, and I get messages about their daily adventures. She's planning to bring her friend for a visit during a long break, and I've agreed to host them for sightseeing. As for me, my days are still busy, but without the marriage, my chores are halved, and there's no one to complain. It's a different kind of busy, but much more fulfilling. When I dropped Stella off, I met her dad, Elizabeth's ex-husband, for the first time. He's a nice guy, and we exchanged contacts. We kept in touch about Stella and eventually started going out together. I found peace just being with him, something I never had with Kevin. Even I'm a bit surprised by these feelings. Stella is thrilled about me seeing him. Recently, during a video call, she asked, "When are you getting remarried?" I told her I'm not thinking about it yet, but if he feels the same, maybe someday. To me, Stella is like a true daughter, and she feels the same. Becoming a real family would make me incredibly happy. With that hope in my heart, I had to work today as well.